The shriek of alarms tore through the station, a jarring counterpoint to the rhythmic hum of the gas extractors that usually lulled Daniel Reyes to a state of near meditation. He gripped his console, the cold metal a stark contrast to the burning fear that coiled in his gut. Outside the panoramic viewport, the normally serene tapestry of Cygnus's swirling ammonia clouds was violently disrupted. A fiery blossom bloomed in the upper atmosphere where Platform K7, a vital gas extraction facility, had been only moments before. Daniel felt a phantom ache in his chest, the same hollowness that had plagued him since the accident that had claimed his family. Another station, another catastrophic failure. But this felt different. This felt deliberate. Sabotage, he muttered, the word catching in his throat. He'd been studying the subtle fluctuations in Cygnus's atmospheric pressure for months, noticing anomalies that pointed towards instability, not simple malfunction. He'd tried to warn the corporate overseers, but they dismissed his concerns, blinded by profit margins and production quotas. The station intercom crackled to life, a stern voice cutting through the chaos. All personnel report to emergency stations. This is not a drill. As Daniel rushed towards the command center, a wave of aether swept through the corridors, their iridescent skin shimmering with hues of alarm. Their feathered wings, normally held elegantly against their backs, fluttered nervously in the artificial gravity. Among them was Xyla, her wings a vibrant tapestry of emerald and sapphire, her face etched with concern. Their eyes met across the crowded corridor. Hers held a mixture of fear and something else. Suspicion? Accusation? In the command center, the tension was palpable. Humans and aether, usually working side by side in a fragile harmony, now eyed each other with a mixture of apprehension and mistrust. Daniel, his heart hammering against his ribs, was assigned to the Joint Investigation Team, tasked with uncovering the cause of the explosion. And there, amidst the flashing screens and frantic technicians, was Xyla again, her presence both a relief and a source of unease. She approached him, her movements fluid and graceful. Dr. Reyes, she addressed him, her voice melodic yet firm. I am Xyla, lead bioengineer for the aether investigation team. A formal handshake turned into a hesitant touch, her skin surprisingly warm and smooth against his. He quickly pulled back, uncertain if the contact was appropriate, if his touch might even be harmful to her. A faint lavender blush colored her cheeks. The initial readings suggest a catastrophic pressure surge, she continued, her gaze fixed on his. But the source, it is unnatural. As they delved into the data, their contrasting approaches became evident. Daniel, grounded in human physics and engineering, searched for mechanical failures, evidence of explosives. Xyla, however, seemed to listen to the station itself, to the whispers of the gas giant, sensing subtle shifts in the atmospheric currents, changes undetectable to human instruments. There is a dissonance, she explained, her brow furrowed. Cygnus, it weeps. This was not an accident. Her words resonated with his own suspicions. But as they drew closer to the truth, a coldness settled in his stomach. The evidence pointed towards a deliberate act, a targeted attack on the human presence in Cygnus. And as he looked at Xyla, at the subtle flickering of her iridescent wings, he couldn't shake the feeling that her people, the ones who held the key to their very survival, might be responsible. The thought sent a shiver of fear and betrayal down his spine, a premonition of the difficult choices that lay ahead. The swirling chaos of the command center was a blur of flashing lights and frantic voices. Daniel felt adrift, the weight of the investigation pressing down on him, the image of the exploding platform seared into his mind. He pored over the sensor logs, searching for any trace of an anomaly, a flicker of evidence that might explain the disaster. Xyla stood beside him, her presence both comforting and unsettling. Her methods were so different from his, her connection to Cygnus almost mystical. She seemed to sense the gas giant's pain, to hear its whispers in the wind. The currents, she murmured, her voice barely audible above the din, they are disrupted. Like a wounded beast thrashing in the dark. Daniel glanced at her, a flicker of frustration mixing with his admiration. He envied her intuitive understanding of Cygnus, an understanding born from generations of symbiosis. He relied on data, on hard evidence, but her instincts seemed to lead her closer to the truth. Can you pinpoint the source of the disruption? he asked, his voice tight. Xyla closed her eyes, her iridescent skin shifting through a spectrum of blues and greens. When she opened them, they were a startling shade of violet, almost glowing. Deep within the equatorial band, she whispered. Near the human mining outpost. Omega-9. Omega-9. The farthest outpost, pushing the limits of human technology, a symbol of their relentless expansion. Daniel's gut twisted. He had overseen its construction, pouring his heart and soul into its safety protocols, driven by the memory of his family, lost in a similar catastrophe. The thought that his own work could be the target of sabotage was a bitter pill to swallow. They presented their findings to the Joint Command, the tension in the room thick enough to cut with a knife. The human representatives, skeptical of Xyla's intuitive methods, demanded concrete proof. The Aetheri, their wings rustling with unease, seemed equally divided, some echoing the humans' doubts, others whispering amongst themselves, their gazes fixed on Xyla. That night, Daniel found Xyla on the observation deck, staring out at the swirling vortex of Cygnus. The lavender glow of the gas giant reflected in her eyes, highlighting the worry etched on her face. "They do not trust you," Daniel said softly, approaching her. "Or me?" Xyla turned to him, her expression unreadable. "My family, they are among those who believe humans are a disease, a blight upon Cygnus." Her words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken implications. Daniel felt a chill run down his spine. He had suspected her people's involvement, but hearing it from her, from the woman he was inexplicably drawn to, was a blow to the gut. "But I do not believe that," she continued, her voice barely a whisper. "I see the good in humanity, in you." A tremor ran through Daniel. He reached out, his hand hovering inches from her arm. He hesitated, unsure if his touch would be welcome, if it might even harm her. But she didn't flinch. She turned to him and offered him her forearm. He gently touched her skin, it was surprisingly smooth and strangely warm. He felt a tingle where her skin touched his and quickly withdrew his hand, unsure of how to react. She didn't turn away. A faint lavender blush colored her cheeks. A flicker of hope ignited in Daniel's chest. He knew then that he had to trust her, even if it meant risking everything. "There is a way to prove it," Xyla said, her voice firm. "A hidden sensor array, near Omega-9. It might hold the key to what truly happened." "But it's too dangerous," Daniel protested. "The atmospheric currents are unstable, unpredictable." "I know the currents," Xyla replied, her eyes flashing with determination. "I can navigate them. But I need your help." And so, against his better judgment, against the warnings of his superiors, Daniel agreed. He knew that going to Omega-9 was a risk, a gamble that could cost him his career, his life. But he also knew that he couldn't turn his back on Xyla, not now, not when she was risking everything to prove her faith in him, in humanity. As they prepared for their clandestine mission, the thought of returning to Earth, a dream he had clung to for so long, began to fade, replaced by a new, unexpected hope, a hope that bloomed in the darkness of Cygnus, fueled by the whispers of the gas giant and the quiet strength of the woman by his side. The rhythmic pulse of Cygnus's heart, a low thrumming Daniel had come to find strangely comforting, now echoed the growing unease in his own chest. The evidence was mounting, painting a grim picture of deliberate sabotage, and Xyla's family was at the center of it. He found it difficult to reconcile the gentle, inquisitive woman he had come to know with the cold, calculating actions of her kin. He found himself stealing glances at her, searching her iridescent skin for a flicker of guilt, a hint of deception. But her face was an impassive mask, her large, feathered wings held close, as if shielding her from the storm brewing within and without. They spent hours in the cramped research lab, poring over sensor readings, analyzing atmospheric fluctuations. Daniel explained his theories, his logic grounded in human science, while Xyla, with her intuitive understanding of Cygnus, offered insights that defied conventional explanation. He showed her images of Earth, the pale blue dot he yearned to return to, a place she could only imagine. He spoke of his parents, of the gaping hole their absence had left in his life, a void he had tried to fill with the pursuit of knowledge, with the dream of establishing a permanent human presence beyond the fragile stations. She listened patiently, her iridescent skin shimmering with a kaleidoscope of emotions he couldn't quite decipher. He felt the familiar weight of her wings brush against his arm and found himself wanting to reach out to her, to offer her comfort. A tingle shot through his arm and he quickly withdrew from her touch. Xyla, in turn, shared stories of her childhood within the swirling currents of Cygnus, of the symbiotic relationship her people shared with the gas giant, a connection so deep, so intimate, it bordered on the spiritual. She spoke of her family's fears, of their belief that humans were disrupting the delicate balance of their world, a belief that fueled the whispers of dissent, the seeds of rebellion. He listened intently, trying to understand their perspective, to bridge the chasm that separated their cultures. But the thought that the woman he was falling for, the woman who was slowly chipping away at the wall around his heart, was connected to the very people who were threatening humanity's future filled him with a chilling sense of dread. "There is a place," Xyla said, her voice barely a whisper, breaking the silence, "a sanctuary within the heart of Cygnus, where the currents converge. My family, they gather there. If we can reach them, I can try to reason with them, to stop this madness before it escalates." Daniel knew the risks. The heart of Cygnus was a maelstrom of turbulent gases, a place where even the most advanced aethery technology struggled to navigate. Going there was suicide. But looking into Xyla's eyes, seeing the desperation, the flicker of hope that burned within, he knew he couldn't refuse. "I'll go with you," he said, the words escaping before he could fully process the implications. The thought of returning to Earth, a dream that had sustained him through countless sleepless nights, began to recede, replaced by a new, more immediate purpose. The journey was perilous. Their small research vessel buffeted by violent winds, the hull groaning under the immense pressure. Xyla, her wings spread wide, guided them through the treacherous currents, her intuitive understanding of Cygnus proving invaluable. Daniel watched her, marveling at her grace, her strength, her unwavering determination. He realized that she wasn't just guiding them through the storm, she was guiding him through the storm within his own heart. He realized that the dream of returning to Earth had become almost meaningless, she was his new home. They arrived at the sanctuary, a vast cavern carved into the heart of a floating asteroid, bathed in the eerie lavender glow of Cygnus's core. Xyla's family, a group of stern-faced aethery, their wings shimmering with shades of anger and suspicion, awaited them. Before Daniel could even open his mouth, Xyla stepped forward, her voice ringing with unexpected authority. "I have come to reason with you," she declared, her gaze unwavering. "To show you that humans are not our enemies. That we can coexist, that we can build a future together." Her words were met with a chorus of angry cries, accusations of betrayal, of misplaced loyalty. But Xyla stood firm, her voice rising above the din, her words echoing through the cavern, a testament to her courage, her conviction. Daniel watched her, his heart swelling with admiration and a growing sense of love. He knew, in that moment, that he would do anything for her, that his life, his future, was now inextricably linked to hers. He knew he was already damned by Earth's standards. Just as Xyla seemed to be making headway, a shrill alarm pierced the air. The human mining outpost, Omega 9, was under attack. It was a diversion, a calculated move to draw attention away from the sanctuary, to escalate the conflict. Daniel's heart sank. He knew that if Omega 9 fell, it would be the spark that ignited the war. The lavender glow of Cygnus's core illuminated Xyla's face, etching the worry lines around her eyes. The sanctuary, once a place of refuge, now thrummed with a volatile energy. Her family, their wings rustling like agitated leaves, surrounded her, their accusations a cacophony of aethery dialect Daniel couldn't fully understand, but the venom was unmistakable. Betrayal. Heresy. Collaboration with the enemy. Xyla held her ground, her voice clear and strong despite the tremors in her hands. "This madness must stop," she pleaded, her wings held wide in a gesture of supplication. "Humans are not the demons you believe them to be. Daniel, The shrill alarm cut her off, a stark reminder of the escalating crisis. Omega 9, the farthest human outpost, was under attack. Daniel's blood ran cold. It was a diversion, a calculated move by the extremist faction to escalate the conflict, to push the fragile peace to the breaking point. Xyla's face crumpled. She had risked everything to convince her family to bridge the gap between their cultures, and now, this. It's a trap, she whispered, her voice choked with despair. They'll use this to justify all-out war. Daniel gripped her arm, his touch a silent reassurance. He could feel the tremors running through her, the weight of her burden. We have to stop them, he said, his voice firm, though his heart hammered against his ribs. They raced back to their research vessel, the sanctuary's lavender glow fading behind them, replaced by the cold, stark reality of the impending conflict. The journey back was a blur of frantic calculations and desperate maneuvers. Xyla, despite her emotional turmoil, navigated the treacherous currents with unwavering precision, her connection to Cygnus a lifeline in the storm. Omega-9 is critical, Daniel said, his voice grim. If it falls, the human presence in Cygnus is crippled. The extremists will have won. The thought of losing everything he had worked for, the dream of a shared future with Xyla, of a permanent human presence among the stars, clawed at him. He had dismissed the dream of returning to Earth. There was no peace there for him, only ghosts. His home was here with her now. There's a way, Xyla said, her voice barely above a whisper. A back channel, a direct link to the extremist leader. I can try to reason with him, to expose the truth. It's too dangerous, Daniel protested. They'll kill you. Xyla met his gaze, her eyes shining with a fierce determination. Someone has to try. For you, for us. She accessed the back channel, her wings flaring with nervous energy. The extremist leader's face appeared on the screen, his features contorted in a mask of hatred. He spewed accusations, threats, his words a venomous torrent of earthly dialect. Xyla countered with calm logic, with pleas for reason, her voice trembling but unwavering. Daniel watched her, his heart aching with admiration and fear. She was risking everything, not just for her people, but for him, for the fragile hope of a future they could share. Suddenly, the ship lurched violently, throwing them against the console. The extremists, anticipating their move, had launched an attack. Explosions rocked the vessel, the lights flickered, plunging them into darkness. Xyla! Daniel cried out, reaching for her in the darkness. He found her slumped against the wall, her wings crumpled, a trickle of iridescent blood staining her cheek. I failed, she whispered, her voice weak. No, Daniel said, cradling her in his arms. He never felt anything like this before, like she was a piece of his soul that he didn't know he was missing. You showed them the truth. It's not too late. He knew that Omega-9 was lost if he stayed with her, but the thought of letting her go was unbearable. He looked into her eyes, and suddenly he knew, Earth was gone, she was his home now. He activated the emergency beacon, a desperate plea for help, knowing that it would also reveal their location to the extremists. He had to choose. Omega-9, the symbol of humanity's future, or Xyla, the woman who had become his future. He chose Xyla. It wasn't a choice at all. He put her wing against her body so that it could heal and felt the familiar tingle when their skin touched. He held her close, the warmth of her body against his, a stark contrast to the cold dread that gripped him. He had abandoned his duty, his people, for her. Was it worth it? As he looked into her eyes, he knew it was. Her quiet strength, her unwavering belief in him, in the possibility of peace, had given him something he hadn't realized he was missing. A sense of belonging, a connection to something larger than himself. A home. In the heart of the swirling chaos, in the face of impending doom, he found a quiet refuge in her arms, a fragile peace amidst the galactic storm. He didn't know what the future held, condemnation or acceptance, but in that moment, it didn't matter. He was with her, and that was all that mattered. The emergency beacon pulsed a frantic rhythm into the darkness, a desperate cry for help slicing through the wreckage of their hopes. Xyla stirred in his arms, a low moan escaping her lips. He gently brushed the iridescent blood from her cheek, his touch lingering on her smooth skin. The familiar tingle, once a source of hesitant wonder, now felt like a brand, marking him as hers, her as his. He no longer cared about the potential repercussions of their touch, his human biology was an afterthought now. We have to get out of here, she whispered, her voice raspy. Help is on the way, he reassured her, though his own words felt hollow, even to his ears. He knew that the beacon would also alert the extremists, that they were trapped, caught between a rock and a hard place, or rather, a dying ship and a squadron of HFY fighters. He managed to rig a makeshift bandage for her wound, his fingers clumsy with fear and a strange tenderness he hadn't known he possessed. As he touched her wing, smoothing the delicate feathers, he felt a surge of protectiveness, a fierce determination to keep her safe, even if it meant sacrificing everything. The extremists arrived before the rescue team, their ship swarming around the crippled vessel like angry wasps. Daniel braced himself for the inevitable, his arm protectively around Xyla. He no longer cared about Omega-9, about the fate of the human colonies, his only concern was the woman in his arms. Then, a miracle. A fleet of HFY ships, bearing the markings of the moderate faction, materialized out of the swirling chaos, their arrival as sudden and unexpected as a bolt of lightning. A tense standoff ensued, the air thick with unspoken threats, the fate of Cygnus hanging in the balance. He felt Xyla relax, her body no longer rigid against his. She held onto him for dear life as if she couldn't believe what was happening. He could feel tears in her eyes as she buried her head in his chest, the tears leaving streaks on his flight suit. He put his arms around her and held her close as she cried. Through Xyla's weakened state, she managed to communicate with the moderate leader, her words a desperate plea for reason, a testament to the fragile hope she still clung to. The standoff ended as abruptly as it had begun, the extremist ships retreating into the swirling currents, their mission, for now, thwarted. They were rescued by the moderate faction, taken to a neutral station, a place where humans and HFY could meet without the shadow of suspicion and fear hanging over them. Xyla's injuries were tended to, her wings carefully mended. Daniel watched over her, his anxiety slowly giving way to a cautious optimism. The extremists had been stopped, Omega-9 had miraculously held, but the underlying tensions remained, a simmering volcano waiting to erupt. He was no longer a scientist or an engineer or an astrophysicist, in that moment he was just a man, watching over his love. As Xyla recovered, they began the arduous task of rebuilding trust, of forging a new path forward. They worked with the moderate HFY and the remaining human representatives, their shared experience, their love story, a fragile bridge across the cultural divide. They faced opposition from both sides, whispers of betrayal, accusations of treason. The humans saw him as a traitor, the HFY saw her as a heretic. But they stood firm, their bond strengthened by the trials they had endured. The dream of returning to Earth, once a beacon of hope, now felt like a distant memory, a life he had left behind. His home was here, with Xyla, amidst the swirling chaos of Cygnus, their love a quiet refuge in the galactic storm. The future remained uncertain, fraught with challenges, but as he looked at Xyla, her iridescent skin shimmering with a newfound hope, he knew they would face it together. Their love, a beacon in the darkness, a testament to the enduring power of connection across the vast expanse of space and the seemingly insurmountable divides of culture and prejudice. He didn't know if the fragile peace between humans and HFY would prevail, but he knew he would be with her, sharing every sunrise and sunset from their newfound home, and that was enough.